"Grandpa, tonight my parents are going to take away your fortune," whispered my 7-year-old grandson Noah as he tugged gently on my sleeve. His voice trembled like a leaf caught in the wind. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. Fortune? My son? My daughter-in-law? My own family? The words cut through me like glass. I looked down into his wide brown eyes, so full of fear and innocence, and my heart clenched. Something inside me knew he wasn't making up a child's fantasy. He had overheard something real, something dangerous. I froze in my chair, the living room around me, the ticking grandfather clock, the faint smell of old wood, the family photographs lining the mantel, suddenly felt foreign, as if the walls themselves were hiding secrets I wasn't meant to know. Noah's small hand tightened around mine. "They said, after you fall asleep tonight," he whispered, almost as if he was afraid the walls themselves were listening. At that moment, every ounce of blood seemed to drain from my face. My mind raced. My son, Daniel Mercer, was upstairs. My daughter-in-law, Claire, was in the kitchen. These were people I had loved, trusted, and sacrificed for my entire life. And now my grandson was telling me that they were plotting to rob me, not of cash or property alone, but of the life I had built, the security I had earned, and the legacy I hoped to leave behind. Let me take you back a bit. My name is Elias Mercer. I'm 72 years old, a retired mechanic who spent 4 decades with grease on my hands, bent over engines, saving every dollar I could. I wasn't wealthy by the world's standards, but I had managed to build a modest fortune. Enough to provide comfort, enough to give my son Daniel a good education, enough to set aside something for his son, Noah. After my wife Margaret passed away 10 years ago, my family became my only treasure. I had always believed that love and sacrifice could bind us together. I believed Daniel was a good man, and Claire, well, she had a sharp smile and a polished charm, but I never wanted to think poorly of her. After all, she was my son's wife, the mother of my grandson. I tried to love her as my own. But now, sitting there in my armchair, Noah's frightened whisper echoing in my mind, I began to wonder, had I been blind? I looked at Noah carefully. His little chest rose and fell quickly, his lips trembling as if he had broken the one rule kids know best. Don't tell adults their secrets. My voice cracked when I finally managed to ask, "Noah, are you sure about what you heard?" He nodded earnestly, his curls bouncing. I was supposed to be in bed, but I wanted a glass of water. I heard Mommy say, "Tonight's the night. Once Grandpa's asleep, we'll take the papers." Daddy said you wouldn't notice until tomorrow. I didn't know what to do, Grandpa, but I don't want them to hurt you. My throat tightened. Papers. There was only one set of papers they could mean: my will, my savings, the accounts I had carefully organized, tucked away in my study desk drawer. The realization crashed over me like a storm. This wasn't about misunderstanding or paranoia. My grandson had overheard the truth, and that truth was unbearable. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly betrayed by my own blood. Daniel was supposed to be my pride, the man I raised alone after Margaret's passing, the boy who once clung to my hand at the county fair, begging me to win him a stuffed bear at the ring toss. He was supposed to be the one I could count on when age finally caught up with me. And now, he was planning to take everything from me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm upstairs and demand an explanation, but I couldn't, not with Noah's wide, terrified eyes staring up at me. This child had risked everything just to warn me. If I reacted too soon, Daniel and Claire would know he told me. They'd punish him, perhaps worse. Number. I couldn't let that happen. So instead, I placed a trembling hand on Noah's cheek and forced a small, steady smile. "Thank you, Noah. You did the right thing telling me. You're very brave inside, though. My heart was breaking." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the quiet house around me, every tick of the grandfather clock now sounding like a countdown. Tonight, my own son and his wife were planning to steal my fortune. Tonight, My grandson had placed his trust in me, hoping I would protect him. And tonight, I would have to make the most important decision of my life. When you reach 72, your world tends to shrink in the best and worst ways. For me, it had become quieter, gentler. The noise of a mechanic's garage was long gone, replaced with the soft rustle of garden leaves, the creak of an old rocking chair, and the laughter of my grandson, Noah, as he ran through the yard with his toy airplanes. My name is Elias Mercer, and though I never thought of myself as a rich man, I had built a life worth holding on to. I was born and raised in a small Ohio town, the kind of place where everyone knows which car belongs to who, and gossip spreads faster than wildfire. After high school, I went straight to work at the local repair shop. Engines became my life, and grease became a permanent stain on my hands. I wasn't flashy, never cared for big vacations or fancy cars of my own. But I saved. Every paycheck I tucked something away. By the time I retired, I had managed to put together a modest fortune. Savings accounts, a pension, a small investment portfolio, and this house that held more memories than walls. My wife, Margaret, was the heart of it all. She was the gentle balance to my hard edges, the laughter that softened the silence after long workdays. Together, we raised our son, Daniel. When cancer took her 10 years ago, I felt like half my world had collapsed. For a while, I didn't know how to move forward. But Daniel needed me, and so did his young wife, Claire. And then, years later, little Noah came along, my grandson, my second chance at joy. Noah was the light of my life. At 7 years old, he had inherited Margaret's warmth, her curious eyes, and her ability to sense when something was wrong. He loved to climb into my lap with his storybooks, insisting I give each character a different voice. He loved following me into the garden, tugging at weeds and asking if tomatoes could really hear him when he talked to them. With him, my age melted away, and for those moments I was just Grandpa, the man who knew how to fix broken radios and tell bedtime stories. Daniel, my son, was different. He was sharp, ambitious, and always reaching for more. As a boy, he dreamed of escaping our small town and never looking back. I worked hard to make sure he had that chance. I paid for his college, covered his expenses when he struggled in his first job, and even helped him and Claire put a down payment on their first house. I was proud to see him succeed in ways I never had, but as the years went by, I started to notice a distance forming between us. Daniel became less about family and more about finances, always asking questions about my accounts, my house, my will. Claire was harder to read. On the surface, she was polite, always quick with a smile and a compliment. She brought over casseroles when I was sick, encouraged Noah to spend weekends with me, and treated me kindly enough. But there was a sharpness beneath her charm, something calculating that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I tried to ignore it. After all, she was Daniel's wife. I wanted to believe in her goodness. Life had settled into a routine. My mornings began with a walk around the block, my afternoons with tinkering in the garage or reading on the porch, and my evenings with Noah curled up beside me, demanding one more story. In those quiet hours, I often thought of Margaret and whispered to her picture on the mantel, "I'm doing my best. I'm keeping the family together," but beneath that calm surface, small cracks had started to show. Daniel had grown more impatient, asking subtle but pointed questions about when I might restructure my will. Claire encouraged him, always reminding him that it was time for the younger generation to take the reins. I brushed it off as ambition, maybe even concern for my well-being, though a voice inside me warned otherwise. Still, I clung to the belief that family meant loyalty. I wanted to believe that all the sacrifices I had made, long nights working overtime, saving every spare dollar, going without so Daniel could have more, had created a bond that couldn't be broken. When Noah whispered to me that night, telling me of their plan, the betrayal felt like a thunderstorm rolling in after years of ignoring dark clouds on the horizon. Looking back, the signs had been there all along. But before that moment, before his trembling voice shattered my illusions, I had thought I was safe in my own home, safe in the love of my family, safe in the belief that my sacrifices had meant something. The truth was, I was living in the calm before the storm, blind to how quickly everything could unravel. After Noah whispered those words to me, the house suddenly felt different. It wasn't the same warm home where I had read bedtime stories and planted tomato seedlings. It felt like a stranger's house, cold, sharp, and dangerous. My grandson had just told me that my own son and daughter-in-law were plotting against me, and every tick of the grandfather clock felt like a countdown to betrayal. I tried to steady my breath, but my chest was tight, my hands trembling against the arms of my chair. They couldn't possibly mean it, I told myself. Daniel wouldn't do this. He's my son. Claire is the mother of my grandson. Maybe Noah misunderstood. But even as I tried to convince myself, a voice inside me said otherwise. Noah wasn't the kind of child to invent a lie like that. He was pure, honest to a fault, and far too young to even understand the gravity of such things. Noah was still staring up at me, his eyes wide. "Grandpa, promise you won't tell them I said anything," he whispered. His little hands clutched mine tighter. I nodded slowly, forcing myself to smile. "I promise, Noah. You did the right thing. You're safe with me, but inside I felt anything but safe." That night I didn't go to bed. I stayed in my armchair, pretending to be lost in a book, waiting for the house to fall silent. Daniel and Claire were upstairs in their room, and Noah had finally drifted to sleep after I reassured him. Around 10 o'clock, I heard faint footsteps on the floor above me. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just Daniel going to the bathroom. But then I caught the sound of hushed voices. I set my book down and leaned forward, straining to listen. "He keeps everything in the desk drawer," Claire's voice whispered, muffled but clear enough to make my stomach turn. "You said you checked already." "I did," Daniel muttered back, sharper this time. "I saw the folder. The bank information, the will. He won't notice until tomorrow. By then, we'll have it locked up. He'll have no choice but to accept it." My chest tightened. I felt like someone had slammed a hammer into my heart. My son, the boy I raised after his mother's death, the man I sacrificed for, was planning to steal not just my money, but my dignity. And Claire, with her sweet smile and her carefully chosen words, was the architect behind it. I sat frozen in my chair, every muscle tense. Part of me wanted to storm upstairs, throw the door open, and shout, "How dare you? How dare you betray me under my own roof?" But another part of me, the quieter, more cautious part, knew that would solve nothing. If I confronted them now, they'd deny it, twist it, maybe even convince Noah to lie. The thought of my grandson caught in the crossfire made me swallow my anger, so instead I listened. "We'll tell him it's for his own good," Claire whispered. "He's old, he doesn't need to manage all that money. We're the ones raising his grandson, we deserve it." "He'll thank us one day," Daniel replied. Those words were worse than a knife. They weren't just stealing from me, they were rewriting the truth, convincing themselves that betrayal was duty, that theft was love. I couldn't sit still any longer. My hands clenched into fists, and I rose quietly, pacing the living room. The walls seemed to close in, pressing against me with every breath. My mind was racing with questions. What do I do now? How do I protect myself? How do I protect Noah? The weight of years pressed down on me. Memories of Daniel's first baseball game, his wedding day, the moment he placed Noah in my arms for the first time. All of it twisted in my chest, leaving behind nothing but grief. I whispered into the silence, "Margaret, if only you were here." "What would you do?" Her picture on the mantel seemed to watch me, her smile frozen in time, a reminder of the love we once shared. I sat back down, burying my face in my hands. The truth was undeniable now. My son was not the boy I raised. He was a man consumed by greed, and his wife was feeding the fire. They weren't going to wait for me to pass peacefully. They wanted to take everything, tonight. As midnight approached, I realized I had a choice to make. I could pretend I hadn't heard, go to bed, and let them take what they wanted. Or I could do something drastic, something that would protect Noah and preserve the last dignity I had left. The conflict inside me was unbearable. Confrontation would tear the family apart. Silence would mean surrender. And so I sat there in the dark, the sound of their voices still echoing from upstairs, my grandson asleep in the next room, my heart pounding with the weight of betrayal. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. After tonight, nothing in this family would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every creak of the house felt like a warning. Every whisper from upstairs a dagger in my chest. By the time the old grandfather clock struck midnight, I knew there was no going back. My son and his wife were planning to rob me in my sleep. If I stayed, I would wake to find everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped to pass on, stripped away. I sat there in the armchair, my hands trembling, staring into the shadows of the room. My heart begged me to confront them, to shout their betrayal to their faces. But then I remembered Noah, my sweet, innocent grandson, still curled up in bed upstairs, unaware of the storm raging around him. If I made a scene, if I let anger take control, he would be caught in the middle. He would see his father and grandfather tear each other apart. I couldn't do that to him. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave, quietly, without a word. I rose from my chair, my knees stiff, my breath shallow. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I moved carefully, the way I used to when I came home late from the garage and didn't want to wake Margaret. But this time, I wasn't sneaking in. I was sneaking out. In my study, I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the folder that held everything. My bank information, property deeds, my original will. My hands hovered over the papers for a moment. These were the very documents Daniel and Claire had planned to take. For a brief, bitter second, I thought about leaving them there, letting them discover an empty shell of what they wanted. But then I remembered Noah's frightened voice, his trust in me. I couldn't leave things undone. I gathered the papers, slid them into a leather satchel, and closed the drawer softly. Then I went to the mantel, where Margaret's photo rested in a simple wooden frame. I picked it up, staring at her gentle smile. "I'll protect him, Margaret," I whispered. "I'll protect Noah." I promise I tucked the photo carefully into the satchel as well. In the hallway, I paused at Noah's door. The faint glow of his nightlight painted the walls with soft shapes of stars and moons. I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. He was fast asleep, his little chest rising and falling peacefully, his curls spread across the pillow. My heart ached with love and sorrow. I wanted to wake him, to tell him I loved him, to thank him for warning me. But I knew I couldn't. If Daniel and Claire discovered I had spoken to him again, they might turn their anger on him. No, Noah had done enough. He had carried the burden of truth far beyond his years. It was my turn now. I whispered from the doorway, my voice breaking, "Good night, Noah. Grandpa loves you more than you'll ever know." Then I closed the door softly. I slipped on my coat, slid the satchel over my shoulder, and stepped outside. The night air was crisp, stinging my lungs as I drew in a deep breath. For a moment I stood on the porch, staring out at the darkened street. The neighborhood was still, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the wind. Behind me, the house stood quiet, hiding its secrets within its walls. I walked down the steps slowly, each one feeling heavier than the last. At the end of the driveway, I stopped and looked back. That house had been my home for decades. I had built it with Margaret, raised Daniel within its walls, filled it with laughter and tears. Now I was leaving it behind, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced myself to turn away. I drove through the night in my old pickup, the roads empty, my headlights cutting through the darkness. My destination wasn't far, my lawyer's office in town. He was an old friend, a man I trusted. By dawn, I would be sitting in his office, rewriting everything, my will, my estate, my legacy. I wasn't just leaving to save myself, I was leaving to save Noah's future. The decision was final. I would strip Daniel and Claire of the power they sought to steal, and I would place everything in the hands of the one person who had shown me true loyalty, my grandson. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, I pulled into the empty parking lot of the law office. I sat in the truck for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man staring back at me looked tired, older than his years, but there was a fire in his eyes that hadn't burned in a long time. I whispered to myself, "It ends here." Tonight, they thought they would take everything from me. But today, I'll show them that a man's true fortune isn't measured in money. It's measured in love, and I won't let them destroy that. With that, I grabbed my satchel, stepped out of the truck, and walked toward the office. When I walked into my lawyer's office that morning, the sky was still gray with dawn. The weight of my decision pressed down on me, but for the first time in years, I felt clear-headed. My friend and attorney, Henry Collins, greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of concern. "Elias, you look like you haven't slept a wink," he said, guiding me into his office. "I haven't," I admitted, lowering myself into the chair across from his desk. "Henry, I need to make some changes today. Everything has to go to my grandson, Noah." And I mean everything. Henry frowned. But when I told him what had happened, his face hardened with understanding. By the time I left his office, my will had been rewritten, my account secured, and Daniel and Claire had been cut out completely. My fortune was now locked into a trust fund that would one day belong to Noah. I drove away with a strange calmness, though I knew a storm was brewing at home. It came 3 days later. Daniel called me, his voice sharp with anger. "Dad, where are you? You've been gone for days. Do you have any idea how worried we've been?" Worried? The word stung like poison. They weren't worried about me, they were worried about what they hadn't found in my study drawer. "I'll be home tonight," I told him evenly. "We'll talk then." When I arrived, the house was filled with tension. Claire stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed, her smile brittle and forced. Daniel paced the living room like a man waiting for a verdict. Noah sat quietly in the corner, clutching his stuffed bear, his eyes flicking nervously between us. "Dad," Daniel began, his voice too controlled, "we need to have a serious discussion about your future, about your finances." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "No need, Daniel. That discussion has already happened, with my lawyer." His face drained of color. "What do you mean?" Claire's voice cut in, sharp as glass. "Surely you don't mean you made changes without consulting us? That would be irresponsible, Elias." I set my satchel on the table and pulled out the folder Henry had prepared. "Irresponsible?" I repeated, my voice steady despite the fire burning in my chest. "What's irresponsible is planning to steal from your own father while he sleeps. What's irresponsible is poisoning a child's heart with schemes he never should have heard." Noah's eyes widened. Daniel froze mid-step. Claire's smile shattered into silence. I opened the folder and slid the papers across the table. "This is my new will. Everything I've worked for, every dollar, every deed, every account, will pass to Noah. Not to either of you." Daniel's face turned red, his voice trembling with fury. "Dad, you can't be serious. After everything I've done?" "Everything you've done?" I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "You plotted to rob me, in my own house. under the same roof where your mother and I raised you with love and sacrifice. Do you think I don't remember every extra shift I worked so you could go to college? Every meal I skipped so you'd never go hungry? And this is how you repay me." Claire slammed her hand on the table. "We were only trying to help." "You're old, Elias. You don't need all that money. We do. We're raising your grandson. We're the future of this family." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "No, Claire, you're not the future. Noah is. And I will not let you twist him into believing greed is love. He deserves better." The room went silent except for the faint sound of Noah's soft breathing. Daniel's shoulders slumped as though the fight had drained out of him. Claire's face twisted into something I had always suspected but never wanted to see: pure contempt. Finally, Daniel muttered, "You'll regret this, Dad." I stood tall, my voice calm but firm. "No, son. The only regret I have is that I raised you to value money more than family. But I won't let that poison touch Noah. He will grow up knowing what true love and loyalty mean. That is my final gift to him." I turned toward my grandson, who was staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. I softened my voice. "Noah, come here." He rushed into my arms, clutching me tightly. I held him close, my heart breaking and healing all at once. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. The silence in the room was deafening as I carried the folder back into my satchel. Daniel and Claire said nothing more, their plans shattered, their power stripped away. They had expected an easy victory, but instead, they had been exposed. I walked toward the door, Noah's small hand gripping mine. Before stepping out, I looked back one last time. This house used to be a home, but tonight, you made it something else. If you want to rebuild it, you'll have to start by finding the honesty you've lost. Until then, I'm done. And with that, I left, knowing the family I once cherished would never be the same, but also knowing that Noah's future was safe. When I closed the door behind me that night, the silence of the cool air felt like freedom. My heart was still pounding from the confrontation, but for the first time in years, I felt lighter. As though a weight I had been carrying unknowingly had finally been lifted. The betrayal had cut deep, but the decision I made was final. Daniel and Claire would never again hold the power to manipulate my love or my legacy. Noah walked beside me, his tiny hand gripping mine so tightly that I could feel his pulse racing. He didn't say a word as we walked down the front steps, but his eyes never left my face, as if he was searching for reassurance that I hadn't broken under the storm. I knelt in front of him, brushing a tear from his cheek. "Grandpa," he whispered, "are they mad at me?" The innocence of his question shattered my heart. He thought he had caused this, when in truth, he had saved me. I pulled him into my arms and held him close. "No, Noah. They're not mad at you. They're mad at themselves. You did something very brave. You told me the truth. That makes you the hero of this family, not the villain." His arms tightened around my neck, and in that moment I knew I had made the right choice. The days that followed were quiet but heavy. I didn't move back into that house. Instead, I rented a small cottage on the edge of town. Nothing fancy but enough for me and a few of my belongings. The walls were bare at first, but soon they filled with photos of Margaret, drawings Noah made me, and the simple things that reminded me of who I really was, not the man defined by money, but the man defined by love. Daniel didn't visit. Claire didn't call. I suppose in their eyes, I was the enemy now, the obstacle that stood in the way of their plans. At first, I grieved that loss. Losing a child isn't always about death. It can also be about realizing they no longer see you with love, only as a means to an end. That grief sat heavy in my chest. Nights were the hardest, when the silence pressed against me, and I would look at Margaret's photo on the nightstand and whisper, "I tried, love. I tried to raise him right. But then, every weekend, Noah came. He would bound through the door with his backpack, his stuffed bear tucked under his arm, and his laughter would fill the cottage with life again. We planted a new garden together, just as I had once done with his grandmother. We cooked pancakes in the mornings and stayed up late building forts out of blankets and chairs. Slowly, the ache of betrayal was replaced by the joy of a bond that no one could take away. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Noah turned to me and said, "Grandpa, why did you give me everything? The money, the house, all of it?" I looked at him carefully, searching for the right words. "Because, Noah, love isn't about taking. It's about protecting. Your father and mother forgot that. They thought money was more important than family. But you reminded me what truly matters. You reminded me of honesty, of loyalty. That's worth more than any fortune." He nodded slowly, as if my words were seeds he would carry and let grow over time. In his young eyes I saw the family I had dreamed of, the family Margaret and I had once built with love, the family Daniel had turned away from. As months passed, people in town began to whisper about what had happened. Some said I was foolish to cut my son out of the will. Others said I was wise, protecting my legacy from hands that didn't deserve it. I didn't care what they thought. The truth was simple. I had lost a son, but I had saved a grandson, and in saving him, I had saved myself. The greatest lesson I learned was this: blood may tie us together, but it's loyalty and love that make us family. Daniel chose greed, Claire chose manipulation, but Noah chose truth, he chose courage. And because of him, my story didn't end in betrayal, it ended in hope. I may not live long enough to see Noah grow into the man he is meant to be, but I rest easy knowing he will inherit more than money. He will inherit a legacy of love, of sacrifice, and of doing the right thing, even when it's hard. The last time I tucked him into bed at the cottage, he looked up at me sleepily and whispered, "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Tears filled my eyes as I kissed his forehead. "No, Noah. When you grow up, you'll be even better. You'll be the man this family truly needs." And with that, I turned off the light, knowing that while betrayal had stolen my peace for a moment, love had given me a future worth fighting for. And that's my story. A story about trust, betrayal, and how one small voice, the voice of a child, can change everything. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this: family isn't built on money. It's built on love, on loyalty, and on the courage to do what's right even when it hurts. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own family, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments below. I read every one of them, and your stories mean more to me than you know. If you believe in protecting what truly matters, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. It might change the way they see things, just like Noah changed me. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. Your support helps me keep telling them, and together we can build a community that values truth, courage, and love above all else. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, take care of yourself and hold tight to the people who truly matter.